Throughout this video, we're going to be exploring some of the most popular Irish bands, some well-known Irish songs that you know and love, and also touching on some well-known bits and pieces about Irish culture and history. This video is the first part of a longer series of deep dives into Irish music and history, so stick around for the journey as I explore absolutely everything I possibly can. My goal is that, at the end of this series, that you will have a vivid picture of how Irish music came to be what it is today. I myself will be learning a ton as I go along, and I sincerely hope that you do too. Just on a side note as well before we begin, if you'd like to support the channel just a little bit more than just subscribing, and also as well as that show your love for Irish music, check out the shop where I've a ton of products like hats, hoodies, t-shirts, mouse mats, stickers and much more too. Just like this mug as well here. There's no Irish tea inside it, it's just water at the minute. All the designs were created by either myself or my father, who is a heck of an artist by the way. If this video also gets 100 likes, I will put a 10% discount on all products on the website for a month. And as well as that, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon too to keep up to date on new videos. So anyway, without further ado, let's get into the video. The Cranberries were, for a lot of us, the sound of the 90s. Like, you couldn't turn the radio on anywhere in the world without hearing Linger or Dreams. But their story starts, like all the best ones, a little bit closer to home. Down in Limerick in 1989. It was Noel and Mike Hogan, two brothers, and their friend Fergal Lawler. They had a singer, a fella named Niall Quinn, and a truly awful band name, the Cranberry Saw Us. Cranberry Sauce? Cranberry Saw Us? Yeah. When Niall Quinn left to go back to his old band, he suggested that they get in touch with a girl that his girlfriend knew who was looking for a band that wrote their own stuff. That girl was an 18-year-old from Ballybricken called Dolores O'Riordan. The lads gave her a cassette with some instrumental ideas on it, and she came back a few days later with a rough version of what would become Linger. And that was it. She was just in. Just imagine hearing that voice for the first time. It must have been electric. That voice, that's what set them apart. It was completely unique. She could go from this soft, breathy, almost angelic sound to this powerful raw howl. And she had that keening, that little yodel she borrowed from traditional Irish singing that just cut through everything else on the radio. It was part Shan Nose, part punk rock. Their first album, Everybody Else Is Doing It, So Why Can't We?, was a slow burn. The English press didn't really get it at first, but then they went to America and Linger just blew up on MTV. Suddenly they were massive. They went from playing to a handful of people in pubs to selling millions of albums. But the song that really changed everything and where a little bit of controversy crept in was Zombie. It was from their second album and it sounded nothing like their earlier stuff. The guitars were heavy, distorted, and Dolores' voice was full of anger. She wrote it after the 1993 IRA bombing in Warrington, England, that killed two young boys, Jonathan Ball and Tim Parry. It was a raw howl of grief and fury. The lyrics were blunt. Another head hangs lowly, child is slowly taken. Now, the record label was apparently nervous about releasing such a political song, and when it came out, Dolores got some criticism for it. Some people felt like she was taking sides or oversimplifying a massively complex conflict, but Dolores was always clear. It wasn't a political song, it was a song for peace, she said. I don't care whether it's Protestant or Catholic, I care about the fact that innocent people are being harmed. When the song says, "It's not me, it's not my family," she was trying to distance ordinary Irish people from the violence being carried out in their name. But what do you think? Is it possible to write a song about the Troubles without it being seen as political? And how do you feel about Zombie being used as a celebratory anthem as well in rugby matches recently, considering its tragic origins? It is a strange one, right? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And the Cranberries story, of course, is forever tied to the heartbreaking loss of Dolores in 2018. She was in London for a recording session and was found in her hotel room on January 15th. An inquest later found that her death was a tragic accident. She had drowned in the bathtub as a result of alcohol intoxication. While it was known she'd struggled with her mental health over the years, the coroner was very clear that there was no evidence of self-harm. It was ruled a solely tragic accident. Her voice was silenced way too soon. For myself, their mark on Irish music is undeniable. Back then, the Troubles were all over the news, a constant backdrop to our lives, you know. When I was young, I grew up on the border, and I have some early memories of me and my mother walking around the town, and suddenly we had to go home because it was bomb scares, and this happened quite often. It was a completely different world than it is now. But anyway, like that song, Zombie, it just became the soundtrack for life in Ireland at the time. It's what we've always done, right? Time and time again. Songs have been sung about events throughout Ireland's up and down history. We have rebel songs sung about real events like. In my opinion, Zombie and the Cranberries were no different than this. They were just continuing that long tradition for a new generation. Let's talk about U2. No. Just hold on a wee second before you click away or start a war in the comments. Hear me out. I know. You either love them or you can't stand them. There doesn't seem to be a middle ground when it comes to Bono and the lads, especially at home. But you absolutely can't talk about Irish music and the impact of U2 on the world without talking about them. They are, for a lot of people, the biggest band on the planet. But let's rewind a little bit. I want you to think about this. 4 lads from Dublin who got together when they were just teenagers. It all started back in 1976 when a 14-year-old Larry Mullen Jr. put up a note on the notice board at Mount Temple School looking for musicians. A few people showed up, including Paul Hewson, who we now know as Bono, and David Evans, who became The Edge. They weren't virtuosos to begin with, not by a long shot. They had limited musical skill at the start. They were just a bunch of teenagers having the crack, making a racket, full of that post-punk energy that was buzzing around Dublin at the time. And that right there, that's the first interesting thing there, isn't it? Their sound, it wasn't trad, it wasn't show band, it was something slightly new. It was atmospheric, it was massive as well. The Edge's guitar, with all that delay and effects, created a sound that was instantly recognisable. I bet you right now you can hear that shimmering guitar in your head right now. And if you were walking around and you heard that somewhere, you'd be like, that's U2. From I Will Follow on their first album, Boy, right up to their latest stuff, that sound has been the core of it all. But I think the thing that really sent them into the stratosphere was their ambition. They didn't just want to be big in Ireland, right? They wanted the world, and they did end up getting it. Live Aid in 1985. A lot of people remember that. That was a moment, wasn't it? During their set at Wembley Stadium in front of a massive global audience, 2 billion people nearly, Bono jumped down from the stage to dance with a fan. And now here gets a little bit controversial. The story about that dancing with the fan has been told for years that Bono saw this 15-year-old girl, Cal Kalik, being crushed against the barrier, and he heroically leapt down to save her life. But years later, a newspaper even quoted her as saying the crowd surged and she felt like she was suffocating. But then she just saw Bono come out of nowhere. It's the perfect rock messiah story, right? But here's the thing. Since then, there's been other accounts that muddy the waters a little bit. In an interview Kalik gave to the BBC, that she never mentioned being crushed at all. She said she was actually there to see Wham! And was just thrilled when Bono pointed at her and pulled her out of the crowd for a dance. Some have pointed out that Bono had a habit of pulling girls from the audience to dance with. And with the whole world watching as well, it might have just been a clever bit of showmanship. Bono himself even admitted he was looking for a television moment. The rest of the band were apparently furious with him at the time, thinking he'd wasted their short set and blown their big chance by not playing their hit Pride. Moving on anyway, their relationship with Ireland is a complex one. For years, they were our biggest export, putting the country on the map in a way that wasn't about the horrors of the Troubles or leprechauns, right? They sang about what was happening as well, like in Sunday Bloody Sunday, but they did it on a global stage. The Joshua Tree, which came out in 1987, made them international superstars. It's still one of their best-selling albums of all time, and it's steeped in this kind of mythic idea of America, but seen through Irish eyes. But then there's the other side of it, the tax stuff for a start. In 2006, they moved part of their business to the Netherlands, where royalties are virtually tax-free. This rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. This led to the perception that maybe they lost their touch with their roots, You'll still see Bono as a Pogues scrawled on walls in Dublin. And that's the question I want to leave you with, when you think of U2, what comes to mind at first? Is it the shimmering guitar and the soaring music? Or is it the controversies and the feeling that they've become a little bit disconnected? I've heard some people say there's no middle ground. You either love them or you don't. But let me know what you think down in the comments. I'd love to hear your take on it. And now we come to Enya, a name that's been all over the world. It belongs to an artist who is just different, right? She's one of the best-selling Irish musicians ever. Up there with U2, but she's also intensely private, almost like a mythical figure. She exists in her own unique world, musically and personally. Her story starts up in Gweedore, County Donegal, in the heart of the Gaeltacht. Music was everything in her family. Her parents were musicians, and her older siblings formed the massively influential folk group Clannad. For a couple of years, from 1980 to 1982, Enya joined them, playing keyboards and providing some vocals on a couple of their albums. But it wasn't a perfect fit for her, The musical direction was already set, but Enya felt she had more to offer and something different. So, in 1982, she made the massive decision to leave, along with Clannad's manager and producer, Nicky Ryan. This was a pretty big deal at the time and a bit controversial. It apparently caused a rift in the family that took years to heal. But Nicky saw a potential in Enya's music that wasn't fully being explored in the band and in Ireland at the time. Nicky, along with his wife Roma Ryan, and Enya formed this creative trio that continues to this day, with Roma writing the lyrics, Nicky producing, and Enya composing and performing the music. They set up a small studio in a shed in Artane, Dublin, and this is where Enya's sound was born. It was painstaking work. Nicky developed a technique of layering Enya's voice over and over again, sometimes hundreds of times, to create this haunting, choir-like effect that nobody had ever heard before. It wasn't your standard folk music, it wasn't classical either, and it wasn't pop. It was just Enya. Her first break was composing the soundtrack for the BBC documentary series The Celts in 1987. But it was the following year in 1988 when everything exploded. And the song was my favourite song of all time, R.I.P. It was just so different from everything else in the charts. That pizzicato synth and the layered vocals, it was a global smash hit, reaching #1 in the UK and Ireland. The album it was on, Watermark, sold millions and made her a household name. And that's the interesting thing about her career, right? She sold over 80 million records worldwide, but she's never really done a major concert tour. She also rarely does interviews, and she lives a famously private life in a castle in Killiney. This has led her to being labelled as a recluse, right? But those who know her say she's just a very normal person who is fiercely protective of her privacy and her music. She's not interested in the celebrity side of things, and rightly so. She's only interested in the art. So I'll ask you this, in today's world of constant social media updates and artists sharing every detail of their lives, could an artist like Enya become a global superstar? Does that mystery and lack of access make the music more powerful? Or is it just frustrating for fans? Let me know what you think. For me, Enya's legacy is monumental. She took the atmospheric, ethereal sounds of Irish tradition and the sense of myth and landscape that you get in Clannad's music, and she blended it with more modern studio technology. She basically created a whole new genre of music. She proved that Irish music didn't have to be loud rock and roll or straight up traditional folk to conquer the world. It could be quiet, introspective, and completely unique. She showed that you could be an Irish artist on the world's biggest stage, entirely on your own terms. Whiskey in the Jar is one of those songs, right? It just feels like it's always been there. You hear it at a pub session, you hear it blasting out of a car radio, you hear it at a wedding. It is one of the most famous Irish songs of all time. But its story is way older and more complex than you might think. So what's it even about? Well, at its heart, it's a classic story about a highwayman, a robber on the roads, and he robs a military fella, Captain Farrell, and he gets a load of money. He takes it back to this girl who might be called Molly or Jenny, depending on the version you're hearing. He falls asleep. And what does she do? She betrays him. She either swaps his ammunition with water or just sells him out to the authorities. He ends up in prison cursing her name. It's a tale of adventure, love and betrayal, all in a few verses. Now, where did it come from? This is the interesting part. The lyrics are ancient like. They can be traced back to a broadside ballad from the 17th century called Patrick Fleming, about a real-life Irish highwayman. Over the centuries, the song travelled and the details changed. The location jumps around. Sometimes it's the Cork and Kerry Mountains, sometimes it's the Sligo town. The name changes, the details get tweaked, but the core of the story stays the same. That's the folk process in action, you know? The melody and the lyrics might not have started out together, and this is also quite common for a lot of folk songs. The famous collector of Irish music, Francis O'Neill, noted that the tune we all know is actually a version of an old jig air called The Poor Old Woman, or maybe even St. Patrick's Day. So at some point these lyrics about a highwayman got slapped onto this older popular tune, and the two just clicked, creating the song we know today. Another song this happened to is Danny Boy from the Londonderry Air. So how did it become a global hit? Well, for that you gotta thank two bands in particular. First, no surprise here, the Dubliners. They recorded a raw, gritty, authentic version in the 1960s. They took it out of the folk sessions and they put it on the world stage. Their version is pure, uncut folk music. But then in 1973, everything changed, and it was all thanks to Tin Lizzy. The story goes that they were just messing around in the studio, and guitarist Eric Bells started playing the riff as a joke. But Phil Lynott heard it, and he saw the potential. They took the Dubliners' folk arrangement and they plugged it into a Marshall stack, added those iconic twin lead guitars, and turned it into a full-blown rock anthem. It was their first major hit, and it blasted the song into a completely different universe. Then, years later, Metallica covered the Tin Lizzy version, and they won a Grammy for it as well. And this introduced it to a whole new generation of metalheads. And that leads to the big question, the one that causes arguments in pubs to this day. Who did it best? Are you a purist who loves the raw energy of the Dubliners version, or do you go for the swagger and rock and roll power of Tin Lizzy? There's no right answer really, of course, but everyone has their own favourite. As I mentioned in another video before, I have my own reasons for having Metallica as my favourite version. But let me know down in the comments which one your favourite is. For me, the legacy of this song is that it's a perfect example of how tough and adaptable our old tunes are. It shows how a story from the 1600s can be passed down through generations, survived being tweaked and changed, and then got a shot of electricity to become a rock and roll classic. It proves that a good story and a good melody are timeless, and they can find a home anywhere from a quiet folk session to a massive stadium. It's a true survivor. Right, let's talk about the big one. Danny Boy. It's probably the most famous Irish song in the world, and I'm putting Irish here in quotation marks for the time being. There is a reason for this, because here's the thing about Danny Boy. It's a little bit of an imposter, but it's very important to understand to get a good picture of the history of Irish music. You know the song, right? It's the ultimate tearjerker. It's the song you hear at funerals, especially for police officers and firefighters in the United States. The sound of the uilleann pipes playing that melody is enough to make a grown man weep. It's become the unofficial anthem of the Irish diaspora. A song loaded with this deep sense of longing and sadness. But its story is way more complicated than you might think, right? First off, let's talk about the tune. The melody itself is absolutely beautiful, and it is Irish. It's known as the Londonderry air. The first time it was ever written down was in 1851 by a woman named Jane Ross from Limavady in County Derry. She said she heard it from a blind travelling fiddle player, but she never got his name at the time. But over the last few years or so, after a bit of digging, the unknown fiddler potentially has a name, Jimmy McCurry. And this man was a blind fiddler from around where Jane Ross was, and he used to frequent this area with his fiddle. So the true origin of the tune itself is a mystery, as we will never know for sure whether Jimmy McCurry was even the original composer or not. It's still one of those ancient melodies that's just lost to the mists of time, which I think is pretty cool. But here's where it gets really controversial. The lyrics, the words that everyone knows, were written in 1910 by an English lawyer and songwriter named Frederick Weatherly. He wasn't Irish at all, and to make it even stranger, he originally wrote the words Danny Boy for a completely different tune, and that just didn't work. The song was then forgotten about. Then in 1913, his sister-in-law, who was living in America, sent him a copy of the Londonderry air. Weatherly immediately realised that the melody was a perfect fit for his lyrics. Just a slight adjustment was needed to the first line. He published this new version and it became an instant classic. So you have this ancient, mysterious Irish melody combined with lyrics written by an Englishman who'd never even set foot in Ireland, by the way. It is a bit mad, isn't it? And what is it actually about? Well, no one can really say for sure, and that's probably why it's so powerful, okay? It's clearly about a painful separation. The singer is saying goodbye to Danny, who's leaving. Maybe he's going off to war, or maybe he's emigrating. The singer knows that by the time Danny comes back, they'll likely be dead and buried. It's incredibly sad. Some people think it's a parent singing to a son, others think it's a lover. It's so universal. So here's a question for you, especially for the viewers in America, Canada and Australia, all over the world even. What does this song mean to you? Is it a beautiful, emotional anthem that connects you to your heritage? Or is it an overplayed, sentimental cliche that you can't stand hearing anymore? I'm genuinely curious to hear what you think in the comments. But Danny Boy and how it came to be, keep it in mind because this is a perfect example of how a lot of popular Irish tunes and songs come to be what they are today. For me, the legacy of Danny Boy is that it accidentally became the perfect song for the Irish diaspora. It might not have been written by a lad in a Dublin pub or a Galway cottage or something like that, but it perfectly captures the deep, historical melancholy of our people, that sense of yearning for a home that you can't return to. It speaks to the millions who had left this island over the centuries. It proves that a song's power doesn't always come from where it was born, but from the people who adopt it and give it meaning. It's the ultimate story of how a song can take on a life of its own. Cast your mind back to 1994. The Eurovision is being held in the Point Theatre in Dublin, and it was all going as you'd expect, right? The cheesy songs, the awkward hosts. It was just supposed to be the filler, the bit where everyone goes to make a cup of tea, get some more food. It's the interval act. And then it happened. One of the biggest moments for Irish television. Dustin the Turkey.
No. What are you on about, you fucking idiot, you? Dustin the Turkey wasn't an interval act, for God's sake. Jesus, the comment section was right. You haven't a clue what you're on about.
Well, that was a little bit uncalled for, but actually he's right, so yeah, my mistake. Anyway, so it was Riverdance. For 7 minutes, the world just stopped and stared. It started with the choir Anuna, with this haunting, almost medieval chant. Then this single, solitary baron beat starts like a heartbeat. And then, out of the darkness, Jean Butler appears. Elegant and graceful, followed by the explosive energy of a young fella from Chicago with the fastest feet you'd ever seen, Michael Flatley. Suddenly, this thunderous sound fills the arena as a long line of dancers hits the stage in perfect razor-sharp unison. This was something else entirely. This was explosive, it was dramatic, perfect for TV. It was Irish dancing on some kind of recreational drug. And the music. You can't talk about Riverdance without talking about the music. Bill Whelan's score is absolutely amazing. I know you can hear it in your head right now. It was a masterpiece. It took traditional Irish instruments like the uilleann pipes, the fiddle, the bodhrán, and fused them with this epic orchestral sound. It was powerful and modern, but it was still undeniably Irish. The music was every bit as important as the dancing. The reaction in the Point Theatre as well, that night was just electric. People were on their feet before it was even over. The phone lines to the TV station nearly melted with people trying to find out what did they just see. That 7-minute interval act completely overshadowed the entire song contest. That's usually not that hard to do, to be honest with you. Of course, a story this big needs a bit of drama, right? The show was developed into a full-length production, but before it even opened, Flatley was gone. There were massive disagreements over money and creative control. He wanted a bigger slice of the pie and more control over the choreography. When he didn't get it, he walked. A few months later, he launched his own even more flamboyant show, Lord of the Dance, and became a global superstar in his own right. So here's a question for you all. It was the big debate of the 90s, and I want to know where you stand. Riverdance or Lord of the Dance? Were you a fan of the powerful ensemble grace of Riverdance with Jean Butler and later Colin Dunn? Or did the sheer unadulterated showmanship and rock star swagger of Michael Flatley win you over? Let me know in the comments which camp you're in. My take on this, the timing was just perfect. The Celtic Tiger was taken off, and there was just this new sense of confidence about the country. It was also near the tail end of the Troubles too. Before Riverdance, Irish dancing was something that your cousin did, and you had to go and watch them at the feis with their wigs and stiff dresses. It was all very rigid. Riverdance blew it out of the water. It repackaged our own music and dance and sold it to the world and to ourselves in a way that made you feel a bit proud like. It showed that our traditional stuff didn't have to be something stuck in the past. It could be a massive global money-making hit. Simple as that. And I've read a lot of comments on the other video I posted about Riverdance, and lots of people from the other side of the world were inspired by this to actually take up Irish dancing. So in a way, it achieved so much to spread Irish culture across the world. Right, let's talk about Celtic Woman, which is a strange one, isn't it? Because it's not really a band in the traditional sense. It's more of a phenomenon. For millions of people, especially in America, Celtic Woman is Irish music. But back here at home, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who has their albums, right? It is more popular in America than it is on the European side. Celtic Woman was essentially a creation put together in 2004 by David Downes and Sharon Brown. And Downes' name is important here, okay? Because he was the musical director for Riverdance. That's the key to understanding what Celtic Woman is. It took the Riverdance formula, packaging traditional Irish music and themes in a very slick, polished and globally accessible way, and applied it to a singing group. The idea was to have these incredibly talented female vocalists, each with a slightly different style, and present them in this grand, almost theatrical way. The original lineup was Chloe Agnew, Orla Fallon, Lisa Kelly, and Maeve Ní Mhaolcathán, along with the fiery fiddler Mairead Nesbitt. They recorded their first special for the American TV station PBS at the Helix in Dublin, and it just exploded. And the formula is genius, like. The lineup of singers has changed completely over the years, but the Celtic Woman brand stays the same. The singers are almost interchangeable, which sounds harsh, but it's true. You've got the singers in these beautiful clothes, standing perfectly still, singing classics like Danny Boy or The Parting Glass. Then you have the fiddler, who is the high energy element, dancing around the stage like a whirlwind. It's a very specific romanticized image of Ireland they're selling. The music itself is a mix of everything, from traditional Irish tunes, classical pieces like Ave Maria even, and pop songs like You Raise Me Up, which was influenced by Danny Boy. But this is where it gets a little bit controversial, or at least where the debate starts. A lot of people in Ireland would look at Celtic Woman and say it's not authentic, you know? They'd call it oblivion music or plastic paddy. It's seen as a sanitized, almost Disney version of our culture, packaged up perfectly for an American audience that wants a particular romantic idea of what Ireland is. If you want an idea of what Ireland is, listen to Kneecap. So I'd love to know your take, especially if you're a fan of the show. Is Celtic Woman a brilliant showcase that brings Irish music to a massive global audience? Or is it a watered down commercial product that doesn't really represent the true spirit of our music? And I suppose the bigger question is, does it even matter? As long as people are enjoying it. Let me know your thoughts. My opinion on it is pretty straightforward. You can call it cheesy, you can call it made for TV, whatever you want, though you can't argue with its success, and the marketing as well. It is a brilliant business model. It's a direct descendant of Riverdance. It provides a massive stage for some incredibly talented Irish performers who get to tour the world and play in massive venues. It employs a huge number of Irish musicians, crew, and creatives. Though I myself I'm just not a fan. I've tried to bring it into my playlists, but just nothing has sat there. Give me Ronnie Drew any day. It might not be the kind of music you'd hear at a session in a pub, but it's a hugely successful global brand that has taken a certain version of Irish music to every corner of the planet. And for that, you really do have to give them credit for it. Okay, now let's talk about the Pogues. The Pogues were an absolute car crash, right? But they were a poetic, beautiful, glorious car crash that you couldn't look away from. They weren't from Dublin or Belfast. This was a band born out of the pubs of London in the early 80s, started by the one and only Shane MacGowan. And their whole idea was revolutionary, like. At the time, you had punk rock, which was all about energy and anger. And then you had the Irish traditional music. The two things really could not have been further apart. But Shane and the lads, they smashed them together. They took the tin whistle, the banjo and the accordion, and they played them with the raw, frantic energy of the Clash or Sex Pistols even. It was mad, it was chaotic, and it was absolutely brilliant. Their original name has a funny story behind it as well, and it'll tell you everything you need to know about their attitude. They were called the Pogue Mahone. I'll let you Google it if you don't know what it means already. And as you can imagine, the BBC weren't too keen on that, so they had to shorten it to the Pogues once they started getting a bit of success. At the heart of it all was Shane MacGowan. The man was a lyrical genius and a proper poet. He wasn't writing about leprechauns and shamrocks, you know. He wrote about the real Irish immigrant experience in places like London and New York. He wrote about drinking, gambling, fighting and heartbreak. He gave a voice to the people who were down on their luck, the ones who were forgotten. He wrote about the beauty and the gutter in the beauty. Of course, you can't talk about the Pogues without talking about the drink and the chaos. Shane's struggle with addiction are a massive part of their story. He was famously unreliable, often showing up to gigs completely hammered or not showing up at all. The band's live shows were legendary for being either the best thing you'd ever seen or an absolute train wreck, and you never know which one you were going to get. A friend of mine was working in a pub abroad long time ago, and Shane MacGowan and the guys just randomly walk into the bar. Throughout the night, they had a great night obviously because my friend had to actually put on the bed. And that brings us to their most famous song, the one that everyone knows, Fairy Tale of New York. It's become this untouchable Christmas classic, but it's a dark, bitter and beautiful song about two washed up Irish immigrants arguing on Christmas Eve. And this is where the controversy comes in, right? The argument over the lyrics, specifically the use of the homophobic slur, in Kirsty MacColl's verse. Every single year, the debate rages about whether radio stations should censor it or play the original version. So you know what I'm going to ask you. What do you think? Should the song be edited for modern audiences, or should it just be left as it is? A piece of art that reflects the raw, unfiltered language of the characters it's about? It's a proper argument every year, so let me know your take on it below. History has also shown that banning a song or arguing over it only makes it more popular, so I feel that either way, this song isn't going anywhere. Eventually the chaos became too much. In 1991, the rest of the band had to kick Shane out because his behaviour was making it impossible for them to work. It was a sad end to that chapter, but probably a necessary one. For me, the Pogues' legacy is massive. Before them, a lot of folk music felt a bit safe. They dragged it into the gutter, gave it a bottle of whiskey, and taught it how to fight. And a good example of this is mixing Sinead O'Connor into it with her beautiful voice in the song Haunted. For me, this song just has so much contrast. It shouldn't work, but it does. They gave a voice to the Irish who weren't living in Ireland, the ones who felt lost between two worlds. They proved that our music wasn't something to be kept politely in a museum. It was something to be lived in, sworn in, and drunk in. They were the real deal. If you wanted to find the absolute bedrock of modern Irish folk music, the foundation that nearly everything was built on, you'd have to go back to a pub in Dublin in 1962, O'Donoghue's and Merrion Row, and you'd be looking for the Dubliners. There are some bands that are just more than bands, you know, like they just stand out from the rest. They're a part of history, part of our story, and the Dubliners were exactly that. It started with Ronnie Drew, Luke Kelly, Kieran Burke, and Barney McKenna, just having a session in the back of a pub. But what they were doing was completely different from the polished, clean-cut show bands and singers that were popular at the time. This was raw. It was music with the dirt still on its hands, like. They looked the part as well, the big beards on them, like. They looked like they just walked off a fishing boat, not out of a TV studio. And their sound was just as uncompromising. You had Barney McKenna, who was a genius. He basically revolutionised how the tenor banjo was played in Irish music, tuning it to the GDAE that everyone uses today. And then you had the two voices out the front. You had Ronnie Drew with that unmistakable voice. It was pure Dublin gravel. He didn't just sing a song when he did, he told you a story, and you had no choice but to listen to him. And then you had Luke Kelly, fiery red hair, a banjo in his hands, and a voice that could tear your heart out 1 minute and make you want to start a revolution the next. Luke was a passionate socialist. He sang about the workers, about injustice, and he sang the old ballads with a power that no one had ever heard before. Of course, this kind of raw authenticity was always going to ruffle a few feathers in the very conservative Ireland of the 1960s, and it did. They actually got banned by our national broadcaster RTE, and the song that did it was 7 Drunken Nights. Brilliant song. It's a hilarious song about a fella coming home drunk every night of the week and his wife making up increasingly ridiculous excuses for the strange man she has in the house. It was deemed too indecent for Irish ears back then. It's mad to think about now, isn't it? Can you imagine a song today being banned for just a little bit of cheek? Like, Jesus, some of the songs I hear blaring out of people's cars as they drive by in their turbo diesel Volkswagen Golf. Pure filth in the lyrics, like. It just shows you how much things have changed. Let me know what you think. Was it right to ban it at the time, or was it just a bit of harmless fun? For me, I'm glad they did, because it just made the Dubliners and 7 Drunken Nights more popular. The Dubliners' story as well throughout the years is filled with a lot of tragedy. Kieran Burke suffered a brain hemorrhage on stage in 1974 and never fully recovered. And Luke Kelly, the powerhouse, died from brain tumour in 1984 when he was only 43 years old. It was a massive loss for Irish music. For my money, you can't overstate the importance of the Dubliners. They were the real deal. They took old Irish songs, gave them an attitude, basically bringing the songs and their stories to the public eye. They took the music of the Dublin working class, songs that were sung in pubs and at family parties, and they put them on the world stage without cleaning them up. They made it okay to sound like you're from Dublin, to sing in your own accent. Every single Irish band that came after them, from the Pogues right up to today, owes them a massive debt. They were the godfathers of Irish music. You'll see them all over the country and even the world. You walk into an Irish pub, over in the corner there's more than likely a few lads and lassies with fiddles, flute, accordion, maybe a guitar for backing, whatever they have. there's pints on the table, and the music just flows. One person will kick off a tune, a reel or a jig, and the others will just fall in behind them. They might play that tune 3 times through, and then without missing a beat, they'll seamlessly transition into another tune, and then another. A set of tunes can go on for like 5 or 10 minutes, and this whirlwind of incredible, intricate melody. It's an amazing thing to witness, but there is the thing that a lot of tourists or visitors don't always get, and where a bit of controversy can creep in. Now, there can be some rules, depending where you go. They are like unwritten rules, but they can be important. Like, don't just turn up with a random instrument and join in. A lot of the time you be invited in or ask politely, can you join? More than likely they'll just say, yeah, of course. And it's better to know the tunes well. And if you don't know a tune, usually people have a tape recorder and they record the songs that be played and they practice them at home. Basically, it's like a conversation. If you've got 5 people there and one person joins in, and that person is shouting over everybody else and hijacking the entire conversation, it's not going to be fun. So the right way to go about it is to, if you have your instrument and you're joining in, sit down, listen. If you know the song well, play along. But if you don't, record it, practice it in your own time, and come back again and have fun. And like I was saying as well, for the love of God, don't be the person who brings in a brand new Baron that you just bought in a tourist shop up the road and start beating the shite out of that thing. That's the quickest way to clear a corner, and you'll probably be chucked out of the bar. And the same goes for requesting songs as well. It's not a jukebox. Shouting up whiskey in the jar in the middle of a delicate air is a surefire way to be called an unsavoury name. So what do you think about this, right? Are these unwritten rules essential for keeping the quality and respect in the music? Or are they just a little bit of snobby gatekeeping that puts off newcomers who just want to get involved? Now, I think I was talking about both extremes here, but the reality is it's somewhere in the middle. If you want to join in, you can ask politely and they'll more than likely let you in. And I don't think a lot of people will be coming in randomly and beating the shite of a Baron, pretending that they're joining in. My take on this: the pub session is the lifeblood of the whole tradition. It's not really about performance or making money. Although I have seen a few places where they had like professionals regularly play in the session, but they were mostly abroad when this happened. It's supposed to be about community, how the tunes are passed on. Hundreds, maybe thousands of tunes are kept alive in the heads of these musicians, passed down from one generation to the next in sessions exactly like these. All the big flashy stuff, the Riverdances and the Celtic women, that all comes from this. The session is the source and wellspring. It's the most real, most authentic, and possibly the most important part of our entire musical culture. The Fleadh is basically the All-Ireland final for Irish traditional music. It's the biggest festival of its kind in the world, and for 1 week every August, it completely takes over a town in Ireland. And for the last few years, the number of people attending the Fleadh has just been breaking records year by year. This year, it is estimated that 800,000 people attended, smashing the last year's record. It's run by the organisation Comhaltas Ceoltóirí Éireann, which is the big body for promoting Irish music and culture. And the whole thing is built around a competition, right? All year round you have the county Fleadhs, and the winners go to the provincial Fleadhs, and the winner of those go to the big one, the All-Ireland Fleadh. You have kids as young as 6 and adults as old as 80, all competing to be crowned the All-Ireland champion on the fiddle, the flute, the banjo, singing, céilí bands, you name it. Winning an All-Ireland medal at the Fleadh is a massive, massive deal in the trad world. But here's the thing about the Fleadh, like, there are 2 of them happening at the same time. You have the official Fleadh, with the competitions happening in halls and schools, with judges and score sheets, and then you have the other Fleadh, the one that happens on the streets, and that one is just organised chaos. It's great. For a whole week, the host town becomes this massive open-air session. Every pub is overflowing. Every street corner has a group of musicians on it. You have hundreds of thousands of people descending on one town, small towns, and the place is just electric 24/7. It's a whirlwind of tunes, pints and crack. The official competitions are the excuse, but the sessions on the street are the real reason a lot of people go. And this brings up a bit of a debate that you hear among musicians. Does the competitive side of it, with the medals and the pressure, actually help or hinder the music? Some people say it drives up the standard of playing, giving young musicians something to aim for, but others argue that it can make players too focused on technical perfection, and they lose the soul and the swing of the music. They're playing for a judge, not for the love of the tune, you know? Well, what do you think? Is competition good for an art form like traditional music? Or does it risk turning it into a technical exercise? I'd be fascinated to hear what your take is on it. especially if you've ever competed. My take on this, I think it's far more complicated than we realise to preserve the styles and the soul of Irish music. I believe that because of the nature of traditional Irish music, that it's going to evolve one way or another over the generations to come, whether you like it or not. Our natural response usually is to protect and in a way be conservative, while the Fleadh becoming so popular and with that making people worry that we're going to lose like regional styles or the soul or the flow and feeling of the music. But actually, because we are aware of this, it actually makes organisations pop out of nowhere with the goal of preserving the music. But anyway, at the end of the day, the Fleadh is absolutely essential. Simple as that. Forget the debate around competition for a second. The Fleadh gives an entire generation of young musicians a reason to practice all year. It's the biggest family reunion you've ever seen for the entire global trad community. People plan their holidays around it, and it proves year after year that this isn't some dead museum music. It's a living, breathing, massively popular part of our culture that can bring a town to a complete standstill and generate millions for the local economy. It's the best showcase for health of Irish music we have. So the modern Irish indie scene is absolutely buzzing at the moment, right? For years when people thought of music from Ireland, people would have thought of U2, Cranberries, Dubliners, just to name a few. But now there's this whole new wave of acts who are making some of the most exciting and sometimes challenging and controversial music in the world. What's really interesting is that it's not just one sound. There are a few different things happening at once. On one hand, you've got this incredible revival of raw, authentic folk music. I'm talking about bands like Lankum from Dublin and the Mary Wallopers from the best town in the country. They're not cleaning the old songs up, you know, they're digging up the darkest, weirdest, most intense ballads they can find and performing them with this raw punk energy. It's not for the faint of heart, but it is powerful stuff. Then you've got the post-punk scene, which has completely exploded. Bands like Fontaines DC have become massive, selling out huge venues all over the world. They have this really poetic, distinctly Dublin identity. You also have more experimental, noisy bands like Gilliband who are pushing the boundaries of what a guitar band can even sound like. But in my opinion, the band that's kicking up the biggest fuss, the one that's causing all the arguments, has to be Kneecap, for many reasons. Now, these lads are a different beast altogether. They're a hip-hop trio from West Belfast and they rap almost entirely in Irish. But this isn't the Irish you learned in school for the Leaving Cert. This is Gaeilge from the streets, and they're using it to talk about their lives. Drugs, parties, run-ins with the police, and very upfront, unapologetic Irish Republican politics. They are deliberately provocative. They've been condemned by unionist politicians, and even some on the nationalist side are a bit wary of them. They are forcing a conversation about the Irish language, taking it out of the classroom and making it the language of rebellion and modern youth culture. So here's a question for you all. What Kneecap are doing, is it a vital and necessary shock to the system? Are they reclaiming the Irish language for a new generation in a way that's brutally honest? Or would you be on the other side and you'd say that it's just empty and it alienates more people than it attracts? I'd really love to know what your thoughts are in the comments. But my opinion here is the one word that ties all of these different bands together is honesty. Whether it's Lankum singing 200-year-old murder ballad, or Fontaines DC writing about the grit of modern Dublin, or Kneecap rapping about a night out in Belfast, it feels real. There are stories being told of the real world people live in. They're not trying to sell you a romantic postcard version of Ireland to the world. For that image, I want you to compare Celtic Woman with Kneecap. Romanticised versus real. They're holding a mirror up to what modern Ireland is actually like, with all its complexities, its darkness, and its energy. And that, to me, is way more exciting than any leprechaun on a postcard. Alright, so that's the first load out of the way. The tip of the iceberg, essentially. That should give you a good idea of what the majority of people know when you mention Irish music. The next videos to come after this will be from the lower down tiers of the iceberg, essentially, and will contain more controversial topics, more lesser known facts, as we journey all the way down to the bottom, where we should hopefully get a clearer picture and a good understanding of the source of Irish music. How did it get to where we are today? So please don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications too so you don't miss the next videos. And as well as that, if you want to support the channel a little bit more than just subscribing, whilst also showing your love for Irish music, check out the shop too. There is bound to be something there that you like, and hey, if not, I'm always open for suggestions. myself or my dad can design something custom for you too. And as always, I want to give a huge shout out to our channel members. Thanks again for your continued support, and a warm welcome to our new members, John and Dave. So glad to have you both along for the journey. But just real quick, like it's very hard for me to explain just how much I really appreciate the support. I don't think I would ever understand why one person would want to listen to me go on and on about Irish music. So seeing the unbelievable support from you all, including just interacting in the comments, just makes doing this so enjoyable. So look, again, thank you all so much for everything. So yeah, anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thanks again for watching the video, and I really look forward to catching you all in the next one. All the best. Slán go fóill. Cheers.